It is now my absolute pleasure to invite the Honourable Bronnie Taylor to stage. Bronnie is the Minister for Women, Regional Health and Mental Health. And welcome.
Hi,
you made it.
Thanks for having me. We made it. Oh my goodness, what a day it is out there. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's really terrific to see all of you here today. We've had quite an exciting time. We got out and we walked. Are we sitting?
Well, actually, I don't know. Helen, would you like me to go off the stage or stay here?
Yeah, stay.
Okay.
You stay.
This is a comfy chair.
So we all sitting? Because I can't possibly stand while you're sitting.
Okay,
that
sure.
Would be really awkward.
Okay.
Anyway, it's quite funny. What is it, 10 o'clock in the morning and my feet are already killing me, ladies? You know, like when will I learn to not seriously do the shoes that are so impractical? And you know, what is it that happens after COVID? Like, have my feet just expanded along with everything else, or they don't fit into my shoes? But anyway, here we are. My flat shoes are in one of my media guys' bags, which they won't be very happy about with all the debris on the way in. But anyway, that's okay. So thank you, and happy Women's Week. How terrific is it to be here? Yay! So much to celebrate, but I am just so thrilled that we are here doing a Women's Health Expo. And I think why I am really thrilled about that is because I used to be a nurse. Well, actually, I am a nurse again, Georgie, because I got to re-register with COVID and I've been out jabbing. If anyone needs a vaccination, I'm very good. And there were quite a few of my colleagues in Parliament I really wanted to jab. And I did offer, but they declined. So anyway, but one thing that actually means a lot to me is health, and particularly women's health. And I think that sometimes it's something that we don't talk about enough. And I saw the gorgeous Holly here from the McGrath Foundation, and I was one of the original McGrath Foundation breast care nurses in Cooma, down in southern New South Wales. And it's seriously, like, love my job now, but that is the best job in the world to ever have, to be a McGrath breast care nurse, because you have this amazing ability to help mostly women. There are men that suffer from breast cancer as well. But you have this great ability to work within the public health system, but be supported by a private non-government organisation. So you can actually say what you think, and you can actually really advocate for your patients and make sure that they're getting the best possible care, knowing that you're supported by that. And it's where a public and private partnership works so incredibly well. So it's great to see you here today. But I think for me as well that I keep saying I have this amazing young women's advisor called Tyler who's organised a lot of this week. And the whole time we go out and I start to have any, sweating issues or anything like that, I go, Tyler, we have to do something on menopause. We have to start talking about the elephant in the room for older women and for younger women as well. And that was how this whole thing started, to talk about doing a Women's Health Expo, to actually start to have conversations. We had a great announcement last week where we are providing free sanitary products for girls and young girls in schools, right? Really important. But this is what happens when you have a female education minister in Sarah Mitchell, and you have someone like me as the Minister for Women, and Sarah and I actually really like each other. We back each other in, we support each other, and we're able to push forward really good public health policy. But I think that we need to do more for women in the women's health space. And until we talk about it, and until we start talking about the debilitating effects that things like menopause can have on women at that stage in their life, when they're entering the peak of their career and they're sitting there fanning themselves in a boardroom meeting, or going up, it actually has a huge economic cost, but we feel we can't talk about it. And why is that? I'm also the Minister for Mental Health. We have smashed stigma in talking about mental health. We are so much better at doing that. I look at the work that the Gidget Foundation is doing in partnership also with Tresillian, and it's great to have both Tresillian and Karitani here as well. Like, what they do for women and families is just amazing. But now what we're looking at too is we've actually reduced our wait list for perinatal anxiety and depression help. It was 5 months before COVID. We've done an investment, we've looked at a different way of doing things. It's 2 weeks now. So we're getting to those people when we need to get to them. We're doing that preventative healthcare, which means that those longer term effects aren't as bad. So today's all about talking about women's health. It's terrific that everyone's here, but let's start smashing down the stigma of talking about women's health issues. Let's start talking about the importance of educating our young women about their periods, what happens, what you can do, how that's not going to stop you playing sport. It's not going to stop you turning up from school. It's okay to talk about it. Let's start talking about the fact that we need to screen for our cancers. Let's make sure that we all really push that breast screen is up and running again, and we need you to go and have your mammograms. We need you to test for endometrial cancer. We need you to screen for those sorts of things. We need you to talk about your symptoms. And let's start talking about menopause so that we can do something about it, that we can normalise that we can tell women not to be afraid to start therapies that they used to be afraid or there may be a bad reputation, so that women can be the absolute best versions of themselves. And I've completely gone off script, Georgie. So it's just really terrific to be here. I'll wind it up at that, and I'll look forward to taking any questions. But thanks so much for being here. It's a big day, it's a good day, and happy Women's Week, everyone.
Yeah. Before we throw to questions, I just wanted to say, I think it's really interesting. So I said before, I've got 3 daughters, and the thing about the sort of free provision of sanitary products in bathrooms, for example, you know, we are half the population, and half the population for a really significant chunk of their lives will menstruate once a month, and yet we carry so much shame around that. From a young age, it's like, oh my God, what if someone saw a tampon in my bag? I remember that at school. And I went to an all-girls school. We were all in the same situation. And yet there was this stigma attached to it. And I am really hoping, it does make me hopeful for my children who are not quite at the stage yet, but we're definitely getting close to it, that when we're having those conversations, what we're trying to do is to be so open and honest about it that it's just not even remotely a difficult subject. And I think that if we all took that on board, I mean, I've spoken to women about this before. I speak at events. I'm a grown woman. I still, every now and then you have that fear that, oh my God, has something happened and I'm on stage, and what if I've just got my period? And in my head, that would be the absolute worst thing that could happen, which it probably would be, but like I wouldn't enjoy that. But then you think, actually, half the time when I'm speaking, it's to women. We've all been there. Anyway, I just think that's fantastic, and I welcome those sorts of initiatives on all of these issues, because the stigma does hold people back. And absolutely, when it comes to the screening tests, they are, you know, I had my own sort of fairly small scare during COVID. I said I obviously have Crohn's disease and I have to have screening for that. And you know, because of COVID, I got pushed back, and I was sort of like, oh, you know what, I'll put that procedure off because it's very unpleasant. And when I had it, there was something that was deeply problematic, and I, you know, thank God it was picked up very early. But we just can't put those things off.
We can't. Well, it changes your life, right? You know, that one moment to make that decision, to have that test or to see that doctor, absolutely changes your life.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Now, can I throw to the floor? Has anyone got a question for the Minister? No one wants to talk about menopause?
Yeah, no, it's like someone has to ask me a question now because we're doing questions, and then if you don't ask me a question, it's like really awkward. So.
Oh, yes.
Bless you, yay!
There she is.
So we're going to talk about menopause.
Yeah.
Because I have gone through IVF, and I know a lot of people who are professionals, we are delaying having children. So nowadays, there's more and more people getting IVF. I didn't know that IVF came with a side dish of pre-menopause, early menopause. And when I went to see a doctor, right, a female doctor, I asked her, like, look, I'm sweating like crazy. Is there anything you can do for me? And she said, no, just, I'll see you in 1 year. We know you're premenopausal. Toughen up. And I was like, right, that's useful. So I went and ended up finding an unusual person in, you know, social media who was talking about the alternatives about menopause. And there's a lot of people who were really scared about replacement hormone therapy. And it was like all of these kind of evil media. It's like, I feel like I was in the era of Trump and that kind of stuff. So is there anywhere where we can, you know, talk about these things? Do we have a plan to talk about doctors that providing hormonal treatment, it's okay, and then we can, you know, have access to that? Because I am very privileged, like yourself, that I was able to get a benefit, and doctors, like I went to a place. So
Yeah.
is there any way or any plans to make it more available for the doctor, retraining in a way?
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point, and it's something that, so I come from a little place called Nimidabel, which is down near Cooma in southern New South Wales, and I'm really lucky that I had this amazing GP that specialises in women's health. But she also says that, you know, the thing is that the doctors don't have enough information about it, and because we haven't sort of talked about it and we haven't discussed it as an issue. And Jean Howes is here today, the Jean Howes Foundation, I think, somewhere, and they are just incredible with all of that information. But we need to make sure our GPs and our doctors are aware of that. And I think what's happened, because I think when we look in the breast cancer space, and we've done so incredibly well as a nation in terms of treatment, so your chance of a long and healthy life after a diagnosis of breast cancer is very, very high. But one of the things about that is that because we got so progressive in our treatments, and it's hormonal treatment often because that's what the tumours will feed off. I've still got it, Holly. So what happens then is that people get really worried about prescribing hormone replacement therapy because of adding in that extra hormone which then could be a precursor for breast cancer. So it needs to be a very considered decision, but it can also be an extremely safe decision, and it can be a decision where those side effects actually outweigh those, the potential benefits outweigh the side effects. So I think you've hit it right on the nose, and what we need to do is we need to start talking about it, and that's why I've decided it's really funny. I was one of those women that didn't really want to talk about it because, I was a nurse, right? So I worked with all women, and I distinctly remember being in the community health centre, and all the ladies that were 10 years older than me would start opening the friggin' windows. I don't know if you've been to Cooma, but it's really cold, right? So middle of winter, we're like -8, and like they're opening the windows, and we all just give each other the look, don't friggin' say anything, because if you say anything, they're going to kill you because they need the air. And so we all just sit there going, no, we're not cold, it's all good, that's right, But I think too, I learnt a lot about that, and if you ask my staff who are all much younger than me, they know all about menopause and all about those things, because I just made this decision that I saw someone who was, I can't even remember, that was someone quite prominent, and I don't normally look at Twitter because I find it quite a cesspool, but I did on this particular day, and they came out and started talking about the side effects, and I have this amazing group of women that are called my Council for Women's Economic Opportunity that advise me on policy. And one of the ladies in that said to me, I haven't caught a plane for 18 months because I'm really worried if I get on the plane that I'm going to have an episode and I'm going to stand up and it's going to be a disaster. And I thought, this is this incredible senior woman in the New South Wales government who's so amazing. And then someone else said, actually, that happens to me too. So I think my role, I need to start talking about it. The government needs to do more. We need to get better policy up, and we need investment, and we need to educate GPs, doctors, nurses. And, there used to be a lot of women's health clinics and more of them around. And I think what happened is they sort of got absorbed into things. But now I'm thinking, it's just going to be the decade of women, I've decided, because I think we're on the cusp of something incredible. And if we all stick together, anything is possible. But I think too that we need to start doing that. We need to have more conversations about women's health. We need to provide safe spaces for women to do that. And we don't want GPs and we don't want doctors saying what they said to you. We don't want them saying, look, just put up with it, it'll pass, because that's not okay. Yeah, I know. It's just talking about my hot flushes and everything else. It's important, right? Share our stories.
A question over there.
Hi there. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today, and also for being such a powerful and passionate advocate for women's health. I'm actually here representing Endometriosis Australia, and you mentioned before the recent announcement with the Education Minister around the products in schools. That's fantastic. What I wanted to ask is, with endometriosis in particular, young women can face there's a lot of stigma, there's social pressures, and that contributes to a delay in diagnosis of 7 to 12 years on average from the onset of symptoms. How can we make that less? How can we educate our girls and our women from a younger age that, pain that stops your life isn't normal, and, you need to look into that. And just because your mother's generation, grandmother's generation were taught that you just soldier on through the pain and it's normal to, be bedridden when you have your period, that is actually not something that you need to accept, and you need to look into it further.
And good question. Really happy that one of the grants for Women's Weeks and one of our future grants, we're allowed to say that now, aren't we, Tyler, is going to endometriosis.
I love that if you weren't allowed to say that, you've just said it, so we got the scoop.
So the story of my life, but that's okay, because that's all right. It was like there was a great pun just then. We were with the Matildas and the launch of the first Para Matilda team, which was just incredible. And the lady, the MC that was speaking, it was all about equal play, but she said equal pay, and it was like, yes, go you. It's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, it's not her. That's all. But anyway, so sorry. Look, I think as well, one thing that I used to say as well when I was a cancer nurse to my patients, and not to necessarily my patients, but when I'd go and we do primary health initiatives and prevention talks, and I'd say, don't let abnormal become normal. So don't let that spot on your hand that has suddenly appeared that you thought, that's a bit weird, but I haven't got time to deal with that. And then 2 months later, that's been there for a while, that's actually become normal. So abnormal becomes normal. And then, as you said, it's not normal to be in bed with your period for a week. It's not normal to have a lump in your breast unless you've had that checked and it's actually a diagnosed cyst. And it's not normal for your bowel habit to change all of a sudden, right? It's abnormal. So it's like not letting abnormal become normal. And I do think we have to talk about this, and I think we have to do more targeted women's only education in that space as well. Yes, we have to educate men as well, but I think that by talking about it, by having people that come out, like what you do, Georgie, with what's going on with you at times, it's really powerful, because people look up to you and they think you're fabulous, and you are fabulous. But when you say that, someone thinks, wow, like Georgie's actually shared that, and that could be a really difficult thing to do, but you know what? I have that too, and I'm going to start talking about that and sharing that. So we can't underestimate that power. And I think as women, and particularly women who've had the opportunity to have a profile or to do things, we have to start talking about it. And I think, and I'm not doing this just because Holly's here, because Holly was not my boss at the time, just in terms of, transparency of conflict. But I think that what we've done in the breast cancer space really demonstrates what we can copy and use in other spaces. And yes, it was massive because of what Jane McGrath did. And how beautiful was that story the other night on that? And we all love Glenn, like that goes without saying, right? But I think the fact that they did that and they talk about it really brings it out, and so we see detection and we see testing rates and screening rates really go through the roof. And I think in Australia we have really great screening, but we need to do that with everything, and we need people to come out and talk about it. And that's why days like today are so important in Women's Week, to talk about women's health and the uniqueness of that, and the fact that those things aren't normal. So we just have to keep talking about it. We have to push it through. Yes, government has a huge responsibility, but I'm telling you, stuff happens a lot faster when everybody else does it. We are very slow moving in government, and it's important, and we need to get behind that. But you all need to do stuff to make us think, wow, we really need to jump in here and do a lot of this as well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, one thing that I would say that is relevant to both of the questions that you've made is that historically, a lot of the medical products and drugs have been designed, and there's lots of fantastic statistics around this, but it's actually based on the average male of 50, I think the age is. And what that means is that they're not necessarily the best case results for women. And because we've had sort of male-dominated leadership in different industries, and then the medical profession as well, obviously we've got lots and lots of female doctors graduating, but it does still remain. So I think what the McGrath Foundation has done, it really shows the power of when it is female-led research and initiatives, and it's being driven by women for women. I think that's why there is that better result, because we are actually, because I think with both IVF and endometriosis, they're incredibly common and debilitating, but they don't I don't think they have the same kind of mainstream investment that something like diabetes might have, which also affects women, obviously, but it's less gendered. And so I think I love your point about when more people work together, and this is why, I know the woman that I live next door to runs, she works for a big pharmaceutical company running a big women's health program, and they've got a huge budget, and this is exactly what they're doing, because it's like we need to start funneling resources in. And I think if you've got private businesses doing that and organisations, and you've got leadership recognising that we need female-led solutions, then that's going to move us towards a place where the wait time is not 7 years for a diagnosis. And look, as someone who has, I said before, I had endometriosis. I had 5 surgeries before I was 22 for endometriosis. And I still had doctors say to me, I'll never forget it, one doctor said to me, I don't think you should worry too much about this pain, because you're studying law and you seem pretty, so I don't think it's going to matter much. I was 19 and I was mortified. He'd just done an internal examination on me, which I hated. And I just think that is something that we do also have as women. When we do talk about our medical conditions, we don't always get the most supportive response. And again, when we talk about it, it takes the shame off us. Because at the time I sort of was thinking, am I being really greedy because I don't want to be in chronic pain? No. I didn't also quite gather how those things all link together. I was like, studying law doesn't make the pain go away. But anyway, have we got any other questions for the Minister? And I will also look, one last question. Here we go, with a lovely bright pink strap on your bag.
Okay.
Which
We'll come. I'll do it. Oh,
sorry.
We'll do that. Yeah. No, you go. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 46, which is thanks to breast screen, spotting a very difficult cancer to spot. Breast reconstruction was a really large part of my treatment afterwards, and I just wanted to ask, with regards to the delays that we've been seeing for people going for screening for breast cancer, what impact do you think that might have on breast reconstruction options, the timelines and access to that, if there's a backlog?
Look, if I'm to be really honest, I'm really concerned about it, because we've had to stop so much, and I wish that we hadn't had to stop breast screen during COVID, but I knew why we did, and it was completely justified in terms of our public health response. But it was a terrible predicament to be in, to have to choose to say, look, we can't do this because we have a greater need at hand. So I think, we're going to have to keep a really close eye on that. I think one thing that we have done well that we've seen that's come through is being able to piggyback onto private hospitals for public patients as well. It's also something that we're trialling in the eating disorder space as well, because it's really hard in government to talk about public-private partnerships, because the community often don't like that, or think that we're selling off public health facilities for private, whereas often it's about working in partnership and doing that together. But I agree with you that part of it, and just being a nurse, so not speaking at all from your perspective, but the difference that it made to my patients when they were able to go and have that reconstructive surgery, and that was enormous, because it allowed you to feel, relatively normal again and whole, and that's so important to our healing and to everything. So look, I haven't seen any data, to be completely honest with you, but I think it would be unrealistic to think that there won't be, because we would consider that, it may be a more elective surgery as opposed to something that has to be done. We will have to prioritise, and there is no doubt that COVID has placed enormous pressure and stress on the health system in terms of health service delivery. So I hope it's gone away now, and I hope we can catch up really quickly. But you make a really pertinent point and a real point, and I think it will be up to clinicians and to support people that support women going through that, to allow them that extra sort of, I know you wanted to do this last week, and I know it's not going to come for 6 months, but we're going to be there with you side by side, and this will happen. Be a big part of what we do. Thanks. Would you like to ask it? Because I just saw your hand up and I didn't.
Thank you for coming today, and thank you for all the people that are here to help us women. All those notes. So speaking on behalf of female mother, I've recently come through breast cancer, double mastectomy, so I appreciate you nurses immensely. We don't have near enough, and the issues you just spoke about, they are serious, and I know from the support group that we do have people not going and getting tested and so forth. My point was that we also educate the boys, which I've heard some parents get the boys to put tampons and whatever in their bags to support the girls and understand. So I'm hoping that futuristically the parents are understanding, let the boys learn as well, so it takes all the stigma away. What I was going to ask you is that with I call us guinea pigs. I'm a community home care nurse as well.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Not COVID. Definitely not COVID. I do always get hay fever. Sorry.
Okay, so moving forward, I feel like we're always a guinea pig when we go to a doctor because they don't have all the answers, and it's up to you to understand and recognise your own body and so forth. If I hadn't have done that, I probably wouldn't have noticed that lump that just jumped out of nowhere. So with the community getting braver, and us women especially, standing up and speaking, do we have anything in place that is modernising the training for the medical students so that they don't, you're pretty, like that's a horrible vision and understanding of that. You're pretty and you'll be okay. That's not what your doctors need to be learning, understanding. And if they modernise the medication and the training, we've got better chance that they will treat us better as well. So is anything in place to modernise the education of the medical world?
Look, I think they're always looking at that. I mean, you can't change some people and some personalities in any profession, really, and people saying, I think one of the most important things we have to do, and taking on board, it would have been a really hard thing to do at a young age of 23 when someone says that to you. But I keep saying to people, and I keep saying to people that work with me, got to call out that behaviour. You've actually got to say, and I think that's a role for us as older women, to be completely honest. We have to do that. And we have to do it in front of younger women to empower them to be able to know that's not okay and we have to do it. I mean, look, last week in budget estimates, I was told that I was playing the gender card when I said I was the most senior woman in the government and I was the most, senior, I was the fourth most senior minister. And do you know who stood up for me? Well, one of my own colleagues did, Wes, but so I'm part of the National Party, right? And so often the Greens and the National Party often seem to be seen to, be very different. It was Kate Fairman from the Greens that actually stood up and said, that's not okay to say that about Bronnie. She absolutely didn't. Bless her. She absolutely did not do that. Now that moment was so powerful for me. And I really like Kate. Like in politics, often people think we don't like each other, but we actually really do. Because everybody's there, I think, mostly for the right reasons. But it is moments like that, and I think I hope that someone older would have been able to say something like that to that doctor of yours. But we can't necessarily change personalities, but they're definitely, I think that the doctors coming through now, it is a very different kettle of fish. It is a different way of looking at things. I think but I couldn't say to you confidently that's not going to happen to anyone else because that's people, but we just need to make sure that it's not acceptable. We need to empower our daughters. We need to empower younger women to have that confidence to say, you actually don't need to put up with that. And we can do it in a very nice way, and that often will be enough to stop that bad behaviour. But, I don't have the magic answer, but I tell you what, I'm going to keep on trying to find it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bronnie.
Georgie. Thanks very much for having me. Sorry we were late.
Well, thank you very much, Bronnie, for your time.